Okay, we are recording. All right, so this is the overview. It's been copied from the spreadsheet and looks like lots of support.
And just to clarify, this would need to be voted on by voters, correct?
Let's see from there.
I'm trying to remember if this would need to be voted on, and if we would need to talk and negotiate with the airport.
I think both are true. I think the toll road tax would be citizen voted, and then the other tax we'd have to negotiate with the FAA and DIA.
Okay.
Sorry, I just joined. Toll road, it can be done through the city council.
Oh, sweet.
So then toll road would be city council, aviation fuel tax is airport.
And that would be voter approved. Any tax is voter approved.
But I thought because Pena is federal, weren't they saying that there's restrictions on not being able to spend the money on other things?
Correct. It would have to go directly towards the purpose of aviation, which wouldn't really do us any good, honestly.
What does that even mean? Like, how does it toll? Who?
It would essentially have to be used at the airport for airport purposes.
The tolls collected need to be used for airport purposes.
Airport tax. The toll is still up in the air. We don't really know anything about that. Because they're saying that we can't even put a toll, potentially, depending on ownership. Things like that.
Well, how plausible is Thomas's proposal of buying that section of Pena?
I don't know, and I think that's something that we're gonna pursue pretty hard, because it really does appear that this would be the largest source of funding if we could figure out a way to do it. Because there were like she said, there were those exemptions made about that 0.25% or whatever. So I think there's a lot of unknown around the toll.
Well, in 2016 too, Adams County and Denver also passed the ballot measure that allowed for non-airport related development to happen out at DIA property that Denver annexed from Adams County to build DIA. So the percentage of people using Pena Boulevard for non-aviation purposes is only going to substantially increase over the coming years, especially considering the goal is to build out from Panasonic into like another tech center.
Yeah, I live in that area and I use Pena Boulevard just to like jump from major, I use it just as a commuter and I'm not going to the airport.
So we could have that added as a question of buying the road and then questions on this 25% of would that free up ability to use a toll in different ways.
And this is Rachel with Den. I apologize. My phone disconnected, but I'm back and happy to answer any questions folks may have.
Yeah, so could you explain a little bit more about the 25% and 75%? What does that split mean? What were you talking about with that?
Sure. So backing up a little bit more high level, airports are funded, commercial aviation airports are funded with federal dollars. And because of that, there are really strict federal rules around what the airport's revenue can be used for. That's true at Denver, it's true for Chicago, Atlanta, all across the United States. So anything where you take airport revenue and use it for a non-aeronautical use is an illegal revenue diversion per federal law. So that's high level background. Denver is slightly unique in that in addition to our airport being built with federal dollars, our quote unquote driveway, Pena Boulevard, was also built using FAA dollars. At the time, Pena was the only access to and from Denver International Airport. And at the time, the only thing out there was Denver International Airport. So the FAA said, we recognize that, but for our federal help, nobody will be able to access this airport out here. And so we agree that we will help pay for it the same way that we are helping to pay for the building of the airport. And as a result, it is subject to the same revenue diversion rules as the rest of Denver International Airport and the rest of airports around the country. So fast forward, a few years back, as Commerce City started building out and Aurora and Denver in that area, our legal team requested an opinion from the FAA as to how we should handle both O&M expenses related to Pena Boulevard, as well as funding for capital improvements to Pena Boulevard. And I believe that was 2015, but I can get the exact date if that's useful. Our legal team wrote the FAA. The FAA responded and decided to split the baby in a sense. And so what they said was from E470 to the terminal, those are all aviation related. That's all aviation related traffic. So Denver International Airport can continue paying 100% of O&M, 100% of capital investment on Pena Boulevard, E470 to the terminal. From E470 west to I-70, there's a split. And the split is also, I should say, the split is a point in time. It's a snapshot in time. If we go back to the FAA today or a decade from now, they may say the split has, the margin has increased. But at the time, the FAA said O&M is O&M, and whether there's 4 people on Pena going to the airport or 400 people commuting and going to the airport, you still have to plow it. There still has to be general operation and maintenance. And so Denver International Airport can continue paying 100% of O&M, but in terms of capital improvements to it, so wear and tear on the road, any sort of additional lanes, any sort of infrastructure investment down the road, that will be split by what we are today, snapshot in time, saying is 75% aviation related traffic and 25% non-aviation traffic. So that, and that has not yet come to fruition because we have not yet, since that opinion was issued by the FAA, we have not yet done any capital improvements on that stretch of Pena Boulevard. So we haven't had to, test that in any way, or there isn't an example of how that has played out. And part of the reason is it's 25% is actually a very significant chunk of money that our internal finance and legal team had been evaluating ways in which we could potentially pay for that. So that that's the legal background.
What is a capital improvement?
A capital improvement, it's like a construction project. So if you're filling potholes, that's a capital project. If you're adding a bike lane, that's a capital project, as opposed to plowing snow, that's operations and maintenance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you wanted to build a toll, that would be a capital project.
Yes, it would. So building the toll would be, and then the money would also be subject to all these same revenue diversion things that I'm talking about. So if we put a toll on Pena, that money, the FAA would have a say in where that money goes. And my guess is the FAA would say, well, from your commercial airport, that's where the money needs to go to, and not towards other unrelated sustainability projects at the airport. And then backing up, to what I said earlier, any money generated by airport assets can't leave the airport.
And Rachel, this is Frank Locantori with the Coflex bid. Is the assets, somebody probably already said this, but I need a refresher. Are the aviation related assets, what are the boundaries around that? I mean, like I guess a car driving on the road, how is that a asset?
So a car driving on the road would not be. So for example, we could not use airport revenue to purchase cars for the road. The revenue, airport revenue, has to be used for an aeronautical use. So while that can be seen fairly broadly, and in that the FAA gives airports a lot of discretion as to how they use that revenue, it does have to have some sort of nexus or tie to aviation, to operation of the airport. In the case of Pena Boulevard, the aeronautical tie-in is that it's the only way to get to and from the commercial airport. And Pena Boulevard is owned by the airport.
Hey, Rachel, one more quick question. This is Sebastian Andrews here. Celeste, you may want to throw this under the by road question mark bullet. Let's just say we were able to acquire Boulevard. Is there a geographic place to that would eliminate all of the non-aviation traffic on Pena Boulevard?
So you're cutting in and out there a little bit. I think if I understood you, you were asking if the city were able to acquire Pena Boulevard, is there a location where that would make sense to create a delineation? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if there's a location that is strategic to cut or completely eliminate some of the non-aviation traffic.
Sure. So the FAA has created the line of E470 East is all aviation traffic. E470 West is a split. And so, I mean, E470 is a good marker. That being said, if we're trying to, a little bit of this is like a function of digging under couch cushions to find pennies to address climate issues. And I don't know that spending billions of dollars to acquire Pena Boulevard just to be able to put a toll on it, I don't know that would be like the best use of general fund dollars.
What about the roads around Pena, like Tower Road? What if like Tower Road had a toll on it and you had to pay it to get on to the highway?
So interesting thought, and that's one scenario that's been looked at for a toll, so that you wouldn't be tolling people that are passengers at the airport. You would only be tolling commuters. Part of the problem, Tower Road, where it connects to Pena, is in Commerce City, so you'd have to talk to them about that.
Okay.
And Rachel, wouldn't there be like
Councilwoman Gilmer's office? And I just want to mention that Green Valley Ranch and Montbello are largely Black and brown communities, and they're traveling not only into Denver, but to Commerce City and to other places to get to work. And so there would be folks commuting on their way to E470 and stuff and passing through those tolls.
And Rachel, would it be the case, so did I understand correctly that the 75 to 25 split with E470 being the dividing line, that was a result of the development, the residential development and et cetera that happened? Was that correct? Did I understand that correct?
Correct. So when Pena Boulevard and the airport were first built, Pena was essentially a driveway to the airport. The only people using Pena were directly related to an aviation use. As
so
stuff was built up, we asked the FAA, hey, can we still keep paying for all of this? And the FAA said no.
Right. So then shouldn't we be forecasting that kind of thing is going to continue to happen over the decades as development happens around the airport, that it revenues continue to get split and it's a diminishing return? And so a solution, we should be thinking about revenue solutions now.
Yes, and the airport is thinking of revenue solutions now. My point is that we need revenue solutions to maintain Pena. So I'm not sure that a tolling option to fund sustainability. So first of all, anything we toll would have to come back to the airport. So it can only fund sustainability programs at the airport. It can't fund them across the city. So second is that if and when we toll Pena, that money will probably have to go directly to that nexus of, we have people commuting on this road, we have to maintain it and make capital improvements over time. And it doesn't make sense. The FAA I can just see the FAA coming and saying, whoa, you have this, non-maintained road and you're gonna toll it to, do composting at the airport? No. That toll money has to go towards maintaining the only access that the commercial airport has. So I think that from both a legal and practical standpoint, that tolling Pena is not a great, it has just a lot of complicated factors associated with it in terms of trying to create some sort of climate or sustainability funding mechanism.
Does access to the airport, so the requirement that it needs to be access to the airport, does that include the light rail?
It does. And so that's a place where the FAA, so the FAA says the airport was allowed to pay for the station at Den, the transit center, and one other closest stop. We're not allowed to pay for any more. So that's what we've paid for at 61st and Pena and at our transit center. And the FAA has said that the airport cannot legally make any more investments in the A-line infrastructure.
So that's a very truncated driveway. Like the Pena Boulevard is a really long driveway to the airport, and by just including one stop outside of the airport, then that's not a driveway, that's a stub. And really, nobody is only traveling from one stop outside of the airport to the airport. So where I guess I'm going to turn to Celeste to help me get back on track, because I think that's what our purpose, our purpose is here. But I know that it's around revenue and the equity and stuff, and so please redirect us, or redirect me anyway. But however, there's climate impacts by only allowing for payment, only allowed to pay a stub of light rail, when that could be a real climate change positive.
Yeah, so to answer that question, that's the FAA rule for every airport in the entire United States. So our ability to change, again, there's just is not saying it's impossible to lobby the Trump administration to allow us to spend more money at our airport on our commuter rail. But I think in terms of bang for our buck and the amount of energy and the likelihood of success of that is very low. And we have spent we've spent 400 million on the transit center and we spent close to 500 million thus far. So it's not an insignificant investment that the airport has made in the A line, for what it's worth.
So as we start to dwindle here on time, looking at the other questions, I guess maybe I could jump right to the last one of what do we recommend moving forward with this funding option?
I don't think there's much we can do. I mean, I'm not trying to raise money for the airport to not be able to spend. It's kind of pointless. And if we can't, I'm looking at the map. If we wanted the toll access roads to Pena, we're talking Commerce City, Aurora, not even really Denver. So that's not even going to help us either. So I don't know that this is really a viable pathway.
And then just to clarify, any aviation tax needs to be used for aviation.
Correct. As would the toll raised if it was a toll on Pena. Anything that's involved with Pena or the airport would have to be spent on the airport or towards aviation. So
are there like solar paneled airplanes? I don't know.
The airport has a lot of sustainability initiatives. They're looking to do more energy efficiency and solar panels. So, this could be a piece of it. I don't know that it goes towards funding the program overall, from what I'm hearing.
No, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, but we need to raise $3.5 billion. This seemed to be one of the only viable options going into today, but not so much of it.
I do, it's not going to, this is way out of my expertise on this area, and trying to figure out a revenue stream from this is just a fool's errand for me. But I think that it's important for us to flag that a real climate mitigator would be to reduce the number of cars, single occupancy vehicles and others that are driving to and from the airport, and increase the availability of light rail going in and out of the airport, the frequency and the number of cars, and even this, it just seems to be a little bit of a silly situation that we're in on that front. And I'm not diminishing the $500 million that have been spent, Rachel, not at all. I'm just saying that these rules are hamstringing us.
No, absolutely. And so the airport, Frank, is in process of developing a pretty comprehensive mobility and mode shift formally adopted policy for the airport. And while we can't take airport revenue and pay for an additional light rail stop, we can apply for federal grants, which, there's potentially an infrastructure bill coming out of Congress. We're looking at that. We're also looking at, there are a handful of companies and developers that want to be near the airport. And so do we require them to pay into some sort of financing mechanism to finance additional stops? Do we require in our contracts that all airport employers have an eco-pass as part of their employee benefits package? So we are looking at, even though we can't pay for more infrastructure, we are looking at tools that we do have in our toolbox.
Yeah, and just to Rachel's point, this is Megan with Councilwoman Gilmore's office. One of the things we have been struggling with over there is it's the same price to take the light rail from your neighborhood in Green Valley Ranch to the airport as it is from Union Station. So it really decentivizes a lot of the community members who could be using that, not only to go downtown, which I know folks do, but just to go to their local place they work, or to visit friends, or there's a lot of stops over there, but folks don't want to pay $10.50 right now to drive what could be 2 miles. So
is there any look at, them paying for parking fees, or it seems to me like there's a lot of other costs that go into that whenever somebody does actually drive out to the airport. That's one of the things that I think about. It's only going to cost me $10.
So we are, so again, this is something I personally care a lot about moving the needle on, and have looked at a whole bunch of different options. But kind of to Megan's point, when you start pulling a string in one direction, that's why we're looking at a full comprehensive mobility strategy. Because, for example, if all we do is increase.
Do we have, none of you are gone.
Sorry.
So Taylor, do you mind